Chapter 2: The Sorting Ceremony. The Hogwarts Express wound its way through the Scottish countryside, its compartments filled with the excited chatter of students. In one such compartment, Albus Severus Potter sat quietly, his green eyes fixed on the passing landscape. Beside him, his cousin Rose Granger Weasley was animatedly discussing Hogwarts houses with their new acquaintance, Scorpius Malfoy. "My mom and dad were both in Gryffindor," Rose was saying, her bushy hair bouncing as she spoke. "What about you, Scorpius? I suppose you'll be in Slytherin like your father." Scorpius shifted uncomfortably, his pale face flushing slightly. I'm not sure," he admitted. "I mean, probably. But, well, you never know, do you?" Albus turned from the window, intrigued by Scorpius's uncertainty. It mirrored his own feelings. "You don't want to be in Slytherin?" he asked. Scorpius shrugged. "It's not that I don't want to be. It's just, there's a lot of expectation, you know, being a Malfoy and all." Albus nodded, understanding all too well. "Yeah, I know what you mean." Rose looked between them, her brow furrowed. "But surely you want to be in Gryffindor, Albus, like your dad and Mom and James?" Albus felt a familiar knot of anxiety form in his stomach. I don't know," he said quietly. "Dad said it doesn't matter, but—" "Of course it matters," Rose exclaimed. "Gryffindor is the best house. Brave, chivalrous, daring." Scorpius cleared his throat. "Actually, each house has its merits. Ravenclaw values wisdom and learning, Hufflepuff prizes loyalty and hard work, and Slytherin, well, we're known for ambition and cunning." Albus found himself warming to Scorpius. Here was someone who understood the weight of expectations, who didn't seem to judge based on house affiliations. As the train journey continued, the three first years talked about their hopes and fears for Hogwarts. Albus found himself relaxing, even laughing at Scorpius's jokes about chocolate, frogs, and Bertie Bott's every flavor beans. Before they knew it, darkness had fallen, and the train was slowing down. They quickly changed into their robes, Albus's heart pounding with a mixture of excitement and apprehension. The platform at Hogsmeade Station was a chaos of students and luggage. Above the din, a familiar voice boomed, First years over here." Hagrid, looking exactly as Harry had described him, towered over the crowd, his beetle-black eyes twinkling as he gathered the new students. Albus, Rose, and Scorpius joined the group of wide first years, following Hagrid down to the lake, the first sight of Hogwarts Castle. Its windows blazing with light drew gasps of awe from the new students. Albus felt the surge of excitement. This was it. This was the beginning of his magical education, his chance to make his own mark. The boat ride across the lake was both thrilling and nerve-wracking. Albus found himself in a boat with Rose, Scorpius, and a quiet girl named Polly Chapman. As they glided across the smooth, black surface of the lake, Albus could have sworn he saw a giant tentacle break the surface in the distance. Finally, they reached the underground harbor and clambered out onto rocks and pebbles. Hagrid led them up a passageway in the rock, coming out at last onto smooth, damp grass right in the shadow of the castle. They walked up a flight of stone steps and crowded around the huge oak front door. Hagrid raised a gigantic fist and knocked 3 times on the castle door. The door swung open at once. A tall, black-haired witch in emerald green robes stood there. She had a very stern face, reminding Albus of the stories his father had told about Professor McGonagall. "The first year's Professor Sinistra," said Hagrid. "Thank you, Hagrid. I will take them from here." She pulled the door wide. The entrance hall was so big, you could have fit the whole of the Dursleys' house in it. The stone walls were lit with flaming torches. The ceiling was too high to make out, and a magnificent marble staircase facing them led to the upper floors. They followed Professor Sinistra across the flagged stone floor. Albus could hear the drone of hundreds of voices from a doorway to the right. The rest of the school must already be here. But Professor Sinistra showed the first years into a small, empty chamber off the hall. "Welcome to Hogwarts," said Professor Sinistra. "The start-after banquet will begin shortly, but before you take your seats in the Great Hall, you will be sorted into your houses." As she explained the house system, Albus felt his anxiety returning full force. He glanced at Scorpius, who looked equally nervous, and then at Rose, who was practically bouncing with excitement. "The sorting ceremony will take place in a few minutes. In front of the rest of the school, I suggest you all smarten yourselves up as much as you can while you are waiting," Professor Sinistra said, her eyes lingering for a moment on Albus's eternally messy hair. She left the chamber, and immediately the first years burst into nervous chatter. "How exactly do they sort us into houses?" Albus asked Scorpius, his voice barely above a whisper. Scorpius shrugged. "Some sort of test, I think. My father wouldn't tell me exactly what it involves." Rose, overhearing, rolled her eyes. "It's not a test. They put the sorting hat on your head, and it decides where you belong." "Honestly, don't you two read?" Before either boy could respond, several people behind them screamed. About 20 ghosts had just streamed through the back wall. Pearly white and slightly transparent, they glided across the room, talking to one another and hardly glancing at the first years. A fat monk was saying, "Forgive and forget. I say, we ought to give him a second chance. My dear Friar, haven't we given Peeves all the chances he deserves? He gives us all a bad name. And you know, he's not really even a ghost, I say. What are you all doing here?" A ghost wearing a ruff and tights had suddenly noticed the first years. Nobody answered. "New students," said the fat friar, smiling around at them. "About to be sorted, I suppose?" A few people nodded mutely. "Hope to see you in Hufflepuff," said the friar. "My old house, you know." "Move along now," said a sharp voice. "The sorting ceremony's about to start." Professor Sinistra had returned. One by one, the ghosts floated away through the opposite wall. "Now form a line," Professor Sinistra told the first years, "and follow me." Feeling oddly as though his legs had turned to lead, Albus got into line behind Scorpius, with Rose behind him, and they walked out of the chamber, back across the hall, and through a pair of double doors into the great hall. Albus had never even imagined such a strange and splendid place. It was lit by thousands and thousands of candles that were floating in midair over 4 long tables, where the rest of the students were sitting. These tables were laid with glittering golden plates and goblets. At the top of the hall was another long table where the teachers were sitting. Professor Sinistra led the first years up here, so that they came to a halt in a line facing the other students, with the teachers behind them. The hundreds of faces staring at them looked like pale lanterns in the flickering candlelight. Dotted here and there among the students, the ghosts shone misty silver. Albus looked upward and saw a velvety black ceiling dotted with stars. He heard Rose whisper, "It's bewitched to look like the sky outside. I read about it in Hogwarts, a history." Albus's gaze was drawn to the sorting hat, sitting on a 4-legged stool in front of them. For a few seconds, there was complete silence. Then the hat twitched. A rip near the brim opened wide like a mouth, and the hat began to sing. As the hat finished its song, the hall burst into applause. Albus, however, felt his heart racing. This was it, the moment of truth. As Professor Sinistra started calling out names, he closed his eyes, took a deep breath, and prepared for whatever destiny the Sorting Hat had in store for him.